An ace of spades, resting face up on a field of white linen. That was the weapon used to detonate a legacy, the key that unlocked a $9 billion cage. When the reclusive billionaire Silas Blackwood, a man who built an empire by calculating the odds of everything from stock market crashes to human desire, walked into the Onyx Key Jazz Club, he wasn't looking for a meal. He was searching for an anomaly, a variable his algorithms couldn't predict. He never expected to find it in Quinn, a waitress whose hands were as quick as her mind, a woman haunted by a past she'd traded for a life of quiet desperation. But when he left that single, iconic card as her tip, her response did more than just surprise him. It invalidated a lifetime of cynical calculations and forced him to make the biggest gamble of his life. What she said in that moment didn't just save her job. It made a king rewrite the rules of his kingdom, leaving his own heirs with nothing but the losing hand they had dealt themselves. The low, mournful cry of a saxophone wound its way through the smoky air of the Onyx Key. It was a place out of time, a relic of Chicago's velvet and shadow past, where deals were still sealed with a handshake over glasses of overpriced bourbon. For Quinn, the club was both a sanctuary and a prison. The dim lighting hid the exhaustion in her eyes, and the steady rhythm of service kept the panic at bay. For 2 years, she had moved through this world of quiet wealth, a ghost in a black uniform, balancing trays and smiling at men who never saw her. Tonight, the panic was winning. Tucked in her apron pocket, her phone felt like a block of ice against her skin. It held a message from the cardiology department at Children's Memorial. Ms. Vance, we regret to inform you that the pre-authorization for Leo's TGA procedure has been denied by your insurance provider. Please contact our financial office to discuss payment options. Payment options. It was a polite way of saying her 12-year-old brother's heart was a commodity she couldn't afford. Leo was born with a heart that was a beautiful, tragic mistake. Its great arteries transposed. The surgery to fix it was a miracle of modern medicine with a price tag that might as well have been $1 billion. Quinn had $43 in her checking account. Table 7 needs another round, Vance. Stop staring into space. Mr. Gable's voice cut through the haze. He was the club's manager, a man who polished his bald head with the same obsessive care he used on the silverware, and who viewed his staff with the same cold disdain. On it, Mr. Gable, Quinn replied, her voice a practiced, smooth veneer over the splintering fear inside. As she moved toward the bar, the heavy oak door swung open, admitting a man who didn't belong. He wasn't homeless or disheveled, not in the way that would trigger Gable's immediate alarm. He was just out of place. He wore a simple, well-worn tweed jacket and a grey flat cap pulled low. He moved with a quiet, deliberate grace, his eyes the colour of a winter sky, missing nothing. They swept across the room, cataloguing the patrons, the exits, the faint tremor in the saxophonist's vibrato. He looked less like a customer and more like a predator assessing a new hunting ground. Gable was on him in an instant. "Good evening, sir. Do you have a reservation?" The old man's gaze settled on Gable, and for a moment the manager seemed to shrink. "I do not." The man's voice was a dry rasp, like old paper. "I was hoping for a quiet corner, just a glass of water and a moment to listen." "This is a private club, not a public library," Gable sneered. "There's a 2-drink minimum." "I'm aware," the man said, his eyes flicking past Gable to Quinn. "Perhaps the waitress could find me a small table. I won't be any trouble." "Gable, stop," Quinn said, stepping forward before she could think. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Defying Gable was professional suicide. There's a single table open by the piano. It's no trouble." Gable shot her a look of pure venom. "Fine," he hissed under his breath. "But his tab is your responsibility. If he walks, it comes out of your pay." "Understood," Quinn said, her voice steady. She led the man to the small, round table, a forgotten island in the sea of plush booths. The warmth of the stage lights seemed to avoid this particular spot. "Thank you, miss," the man murmured, settling into the chair. He didn't look at the menu. He just watched the band, his hands resting on the table. They were old hands, veined and spotted, but his fingers were long and elegant, moving in a silent rhythm against the wood. Quinn brought him a glass of chilled water with a lemon twist. She didn't know why she'd intervened. Maybe it was the quiet dignity in his posture, or the flicker of deep loneliness in his eyes that reminded her of her own. What she didn't know, what no one in that room could possibly comprehend, was that the man in the worn tweed jacket was Silas Blackwood. His personal fortune, built on a global network of casinos and a revolutionary risk analysis software called Cerberus, was estimated at over $9 billion. And he wasn't just listening to the music. He was conducting an audition for the future of his entire world. From his corner table, Silas watched her. For 50 years, he had studied people the way a jeweler studies gems, looking for the flaw, the inclusion, the hidden fracture point. He saw it in the desperate bravado of the high rollers in his casinos, and he saw it in the predatory smiles of his own children, Kian and Serafina, who treated his life's work as a trust fund to be drained. A week ago, his oncologist had laid out the final hand. Glioblastoma, a spiderweb of a tumor spreading through his brain. 6 months, maybe less. When he had informed his children, Kian's first question was about liquidating assets to cover his gambling debts in Macau. Serafina had immediately begun planning a philanthropic gala in his honor, a transparent attempt to cement her position as the heir apparent in society's eyes. That night, Silas realized he had built a magnificent ship with no worthy captain to steer it. His legacy was destined to be scuttled by the very people who bore his name. He needed an heir, not of blood, but of vision. Someone who understood that the real game wasn't about the cards you were dealt, but how you perceived their value. So he devised his final, most important test. He wasn't looking for kindness. That was too easily faked. He was looking for perception. He was looking for someone who could see the trick. Quinn moved through the club with an efficiency that was almost an art form. He watched her handle a belligerent drunk at the bar, not with confrontation, but with a quiet word and a subtle gesture that diffused the situation before Gable even noticed. He saw her slip a bread roll from a cleared table into her apron pocket, her eyes darting around to make sure no one saw. Not for herself, he suspected, but for someone else. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a survivor, a strategist moving through a hostile environment. When the time came to leave, Silas reached into his jacket. He didn't touch the wallet containing a black credit card with no limit. Instead, his fingers found the single playing card he'd brought for this purpose. It was from a rare 19th century Florentine deck, a work of art in itself. He placed it face up on the check, the ace of spades. He stood and walked toward the door. He was halfway there when he heard her voice. "Sir, you forgot this." He turned. Quinn was standing by the table, holding the card between her thumb and forefinger. Her expression wasn't confused or annoyed, as he'd expected. It was analytical. "That's your tip," Silas said, his voice a gruff challenge. Gable materialized beside her, his face flushed with anger. "A playing card. Is this some kind of joke? I'm calling security." "No, wait," Quinn said, her eyes locked on Silas. She ignored Gable completely. "This isn't a joke." She looked down at the card, then back up at him. "And it isn't a tip." The club seemed to fade away. The music, the chatter, all of it receded until it was just the two of them in the small circle of light. "And what is it then?" Silas asked, a genuine flicker of curiosity breaking through his cold facade. Quinn took a step toward him. "When I was a kid, I worked for a magician," she said softly, a confession disguised as an observation. "He taught me that every trick has 3 parts. The pledge, where the magician shows you something ordinary. The turn, where he makes it do something extraordinary. And the prestige, the final effect." She held up the card. "This is the pledge, an ordinary playing card. But the ace of spades isn't ordinary, is it? It's the death card, the card of endings. But in a game of poker, it's the highest card you can hold. It's the beginning of a winning hand. It's power." A lump formed in Silas's throat. She saw it. She actually saw it. "You're not tipping me," Quinn continued, her voice gaining a quiet confidence. "You're asking me a question. You're showing me 2 sides of the same card, an end and a beginning, and asking me which one I see. What I value." She walked right up to him and gently placed the card back in his hand, her fingers warm against his cold skin. "I can't accept this, sir. Not because it isn't money, but because it's worth more than money. It's a question, and my answer is this. I value beginnings. I'm fighting for one right now, for my brother. That's the only hand I'm willing to bet on." She gave him a small, sad smile. "You should keep your card. You might need it for whatever game you're playing." Silas Blackwood stood frozen, the ace of spades feeling as heavy as a gold bar in his palm. "In my house, guests don't pay for kindness," a waitress in Seattle had once told a different dying billionaire. This was something more. This woman hadn't offered him kindness. She had offered him understanding. She had seen through the disguise, past the billionaire, past the old man, and had read the very question etched onto his soul. He nodded slowly, unable to speak. He turned and walked out of the Onyx Key, leaving a stunned Mr. Gable and a strangely peaceful Quinn in his wake. He stepped into the cool Chicago night, where a discreet black Bentley was waiting at the curb. His driver, a former MI6 agent named Alistair, opened the door. "How was the performance, Mr. Blackwood?" Silas slid into the soft leather seat, the scent of the car a world away from the club's stale smoke. He looked at the card in his hand. "The performance is over," he said, his voice clear and strong, the rasp of the old man gone. "Get me Evelyn Reed on the line." "It's nearly 1 a.m. in London, sir," Alistair noted. "I don't care if she's meeting the Queen. Wake her up," Silas commanded, his gaze fixed on the glowing sign of the club as the car pulled away. "Tell her to fly to Chicago in the morning. We're tearing up my entire estate plan. The Magpie has found his final acquisition." The penthouse atop Blackwood Tower was less a home and more a sterile museum of power. From its windows, Chicago was a glittering circuit board, a system Silas had learned to master. His daughter, Serafina, stood before one of these windows, a flute of champagne in her hand, her voice like chipping ice. "He's getting worse, Kian," she said into her phone. "He was out wandering again tonight. Alistair said he was at some sordid little jazz club. If the board gets wind that the CEO is losing his mind, our position in the Nakatomi merger will be compromised." On the other end of the line, from a private suite at the Bellagio in Las Vegas, Kian Blackwood laughed. A pile of casino chips sat beside him, a mountain of leveraged debt. "Let the old man have his fun, Sarah. The doctors gave him 6 months. The merger closes in 2. All we need is for him to stay alive long enough to sign the papers." After that, we invoke the medical power of attorney and put him in a comfortable home where he can play with his toys." "He met with Evelyn Reed this morning," Serafina said, her voice dropping. "She flew in from London." Kian's laughter died. "The shark? Why is he meeting with his executioner? She only handles his personal estate, not corporate." "I don't know," Serafina hissed, "but it means he's changing something big. I want you back in Chicago by tomorrow. If he's altering the family trust, we need to be prepared to challenge it on grounds of diminished capacity." While his children sharpened their knives, Silas sat in his stark, minimalist study. Across the marble desk, Evelyn Reed reviewed the document, her expression unreadable. She was a woman in her 50s, with sharp grey eyes, and a reputation for being utterly ruthless and impeccably discreet. "Are you absolutely certain, Silas?" she asked, her British accent precise. "This isn't just disinheritance, it's an erasure. You are removing your bloodline from a century of history. They will fight this with everything they have." Silas coughed, a dry, painful sound. "They are not my bloodline, Evelyn. They are a liability, a rounding error in my final equation." He closed his eyes, picturing the waitress, Quinn. "Last night, I met a woman who has nothing. She's fighting for her brother's life, and when presented with a test, she didn't see an opportunity for gain. She saw a symbol. She saw a choice. She has a mind that sees beyond the surface, a quality my children have never once displayed." He opened his eyes, a feverish intensity burning in them. "Kian sees a casino as a place to lose money. I see it as a monument to the predictable irrationality of human hope. Serafina sees a charity gala as a photo opportunity. I see it as a strategic acquisition of social capital. They see the trick. This girl, she sees the magic." "They will destroy her, Silas," Evelyn warned. "They will dig into every corner of her life. They will use her poverty, her past, her brother's illness. They will paint her as a predator who took advantage of a dying man." "Which is why you are the executor," Silas said, pushing a slim, encrypted tablet across the desk. "On that is everything my security team has compiled on Quinn Vance in the last 12 hours. Her past is complicated. She used to be involved in the underground card scene, a prodigy. She gave it all up for her brother. She's not a saint, Evelyn. She's a survivor. That's why she'll win." He picked up a heavy fountain pen. "The will is to be structured with a morality clause, paragraph 6. The beneficiary must be of sound moral and strategic character. My children will use that to attack her, but I've added a codicil, a poison pill of my own. You are not to reveal it unless they make a formal move to oust her." He signed the document with a steady hand. "It's done," he whispered, leaning back, a strange sense of peace settling over him. "The board is set. The game can begin." 3 weeks later, the news broke like a thunderclap across the financial world. Silas Blackwood, the magpie of modern finance, dead at 72. At the Onyx Key, the news was a passing headline on the bar's television, muted in favor of a smooth jazz trio. Quinn was polishing glasses, the rhythm a familiar comfort in a world that was spinning out of control. Leo's doctors had called that morning. A complication. They needed to move the surgery up. They needed a deposit of $50,000 within 72 hours, or they would have to give the surgical slot to another patient. She saw the photo of Silas Blackwood on the screen. The piercing eyes were unmistakable. It was him, the man from the club. A pang of sadness hit her. He had seemed so lonely. She hoped he'd found peace. She didn't have time to dwell on it. Her world was collapsing. $50,000. She might as well try to wish for the moon. She felt a familiar, cold dread creeping in, the kind that came before a terrible fall. She didn't notice the black Bentley that pulled up to the curb, nor the elegant woman in a tailored London suit who stepped out and walked purposefully toward the club's entrance, a leather briefcase in her hand. Meanwhile, at the Blackwood estate, the wake was in full swing, a grotesque parody of grief. Kian was accepting condolences while simultaneously closing a deal on his phone. Serafina was networking with a senator, her black dress a costume for her ambition. At precisely 2 p.m., Evelyn Reed gathered them in the library. Kian and Serafina sat expectantly, their feigned sadness barely concealing their avarice. "Let's get on with it, Evelyn," Kian said impatiently. "We know the structure. A 50-50 split of all assets." Evelyn adjusted her glasses, her gaze sweeping over them with cold neutrality. Mr. Blackwood made some unconventional alterations to his final testament. She opened the binder. "To my son, Kian, I leave a single poker chip from the first casino I ever owned, and a lifetime ban from every Blackwood property worldwide. May you learn, finally, that the house always wins." Kian's face went white. "What? That's a joke." "To my daughter, Serafina," Evelyn continued, her voice unwavering, "I leave her reflection in the mirror. I hope it will one day show her something of value. I leave her nothing else." Serafina leapt to her feet, her face a mask of fury. "This is preposterous. He was delusional. We will contest this. We will sue you into oblivion." "I haven't finished," Evelyn said, silencing the room. "The entirety of the Blackwood Global Estate, its assets, properties, and controlling interest, valued at approximately $9.4 billion, is to be left to a single, non-familial beneficiary." "Who?" Kian and Serafina screamed in unison. Evelyn looked down at the paper, then up at them, a flicker of grim satisfaction in her eyes. "The sole beneficiary is a Ms. Quinn Vance." "Who the hell is Quinn Vance?" Kian roared. "She is a waitress at the Onyx Key Jazz Club," Evelyn stated calmly. "And as of the moment I file this document, she is the chairwoman of the board and your new boss." She closed the binder with a definitive snap. "Security will now escort you from the premises. The new owner will decide if you are ever allowed to return." The atmosphere in the Onyx Key had turned sour. Quinn had accidentally spilled a tray of drinks, a costly mistake she couldn't afford. Mr. Gable had cornered her by the service station, his voice a low, vicious snarl. "That's the 3rd time this month, Vance. You're a liability. I want your apron and your locker key. You're fired." This was it. The floor had given way. No job, no money, no hope for Leo. She was about to plead when a crisp British voice cut through the air. "Pardon me. I am looking for Ms. Quinn Vance." Evelyn Reed stood there, an oasis of calm and power in the chaotic club. Gable's anger vanished, replaced by fawning civility. "She's just leaving, madam." "Fired, I'm afraid." "I think not," Evelyn said, her eyes finding Quinn. "Ms. Vance, my name is Evelyn Reed. I am the executor of the estate of the late Silas Blackwood." Quinn stared, confused. "The man with the tweed jacket?" "The very same," Evelyn confirmed. "He was deeply moved by your conversation. So much so that he amended his will. He has left you his entire fortune." The club fell silent. Quinn felt the world tilt on its axis. I don't understand." "You are now the owner of Blackwood Global," Evelyn said, her voice softening slightly. "You are one of the wealthiest women on the planet." Gable made a sound like a dying goose. Billionaire? Quinn? I was just testing you. A little management role play. You passed with flying colors." Quinn didn't hear him. She was staring at Evelyn, the words echoing in the sudden silence of her mind. A thought, sharp and clear as a diamond, cut through the shock. $50,000. "The money," Quinn whispered, grabbing Evelyn's arm. "Is it real? Can I access it?" "Now." "The assets are legally yours, but they are held in a transitional trust," Evelyn explained. "The board must formally ratify your appointment. It's a formality, but it will take a day or two." "I don't have a day," Quinn said, the desperation returning, sharp and piercing. "My brother needs surgery. He needs a deposit. By tomorrow." Just then, the doors to the club burst open. It wasn't the press. It was Kian and Serafina Blackwood, their faces contorted with rage, flanked by a man in a sharkskin suit who radiated menace. "There she is!" Serafina shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at Quinn. "The grifter who swindled our father." The man in the suit stepped forward, a predatory smile on his face. "Ms. Vance, my name is Fletcher Kane. I represent the Blackwood family. We are formally contesting the will on the grounds of undue influence and clear evidence of your morally compromised character." He snapped his fingers, and an associate stepped forward, holding a tablet. On the screen was a grainy black and white video. Quinn's blood ran cold. It was her, years younger, seated at a poker table in a smoky back room. A pile of cash sat in front of her. The video showed her executing a perfect bottom deal, a move so subtle only a true expert would spot it. "This video," Kane announced to the stunned club patrons, "shows our new CEO in her natural habitat. A common card cheat, a hustler. We have a sworn affidavit from a man she fleeced out of his life savings." "That's not true," Quinn cried. "That was years ago. I was a kid. I was just dealing, not playing." "Tell it to the board of trustees," Kane sneered. "We've already sent them the file. As of 5 minutes ago, they have voted to enact the morality clause. All assets of the Blackwood estate are frozen, pending a full investigation into your criminal past." He leaned in, his voice a venomous whisper. "You won't see a single dime. And by the time we're done with you, you'll be lucky to get a job washing dishes. Have a nice life." He turned and left, the Blackwood siblings trailing in his wake like vultures. The club was silent, the patrons staring. Mr. Gable looked at her with renewed disgust. Evelyn Reed looked at her with something akin to pity. But Quinn saw none of it. All she could hear was the ticking clock, the sound of her brother's life slipping away. The fortune that could save him, now trapped behind a wall of lies, as unreachable as the moon. She had been given the keys to a kingdom, only to find herself locked in a deeper, more desperate dungeon than before. The silence in the onyx key was a physical thing, a heavy blanket smothering the last notes of jazz. Patrons stared, their faces a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. Mr. Gable, who moments ago had been practically bowing to Quinn, now looked at her as if she were a roach he'd found in the soup. The world had offered her a kingdom and snatched it back in the same breath, leaving her with nothing but the dust of its collapse. Evelyn Reed's composure was a fortress, but Quinn could see the hairline cracks of frustration around her eyes. "This is a setback," Evelyn said, her voice a low, controlled murmur, but not an insurmountable one. "We will fight this." "Fight it with what?" Quinn's voice was a ragged whisper. The shock was wearing off, replaced by the cold, familiar terror she had lived with for years. "They have a video. They have lawyers. I have nothing." She looked at her hands, the hands that had dealt cards, served drinks, and held her brother's feverish brow. They felt useless. "Leo needs that surgery deposit." 72 hours, Evelyn. That's all the time I have. This isn't a legal battle for me. It's a countdown. Evelyn's gaze sharpened. The board's vote to freeze the assets is provisional. They need to hold a formal hearing to ratify it. Kane will push for it to happen as soon as possible to cement their position, likely within 48 hours. Then it's over, Quinn said, the fight draining out of her. No, Evelyn said, her tone hardening. It is not. Silas Blackwood was the most formidable man I have ever known. He played chess while everyone else was playing checkers. Do you truly believe he would build an entire succession plan on a foundation so easily shattered? The question hung in the air. Quinn thought of the old man in the tweed jacket, the piercing eyes that saw everything, the way he had presented, the ace of spades. A test, not a gift. A game. Every trick has 3 parts, she had told him. The pledge, the turn, and the prestige. The inheritance was the pledge, something ordinary, a transfer of wealth. The siblings' attack was the turn, making that wealth vanish into thin air. But the prestige, the final effect, that was still to come. Silas wouldn't have left the final act of his life's performance in the hands of his enemies. He would have designed it himself. The poison pill, Quinn whispered, her eyes meeting Evelyn's. He told you he added a codicil, a poison pill to be revealed if they made a move to oust me. A flicker of respect lit Evelyn's eyes. He did, but he didn't give it to me. He said it was his final piece of misdirection. He told me, the key to the lock is the lock itself. Cerberus will guard the gate. Cerberus? His risk analysis software, Evelyn explained. But it was more than that. It was his digital fortress, the brain that ran his empire. It's housed in his private study at the top of Blackwood Tower. The siblings will have changed the access codes by now. They will have locked us out. Quinn's mind, the mind that could track 17 conversations at once in a noisy club, that could calculate the odds of a flush draw on the river, began to work. The panic receded, replaced by a cold, clear focus. This wasn't a courtroom. It was a card table. Fletcher Kane and the Blackwoods had just shown their hand. They thought it was a royal flush, but Silas was the dealer, and the dealer always knew what was left in the deck. They've locked you out, Quinn corrected, a new strength in her voice. They think they're fighting a lawyer. They don't know they're playing against a magician. She looked down at her simple waitress uniform. I need a change of clothes, and I need to get into that study. Evelyn allowed a small, dangerous smile. I believe I can arrange that. The tower's security chief owes Mr. Blackwood a debt of loyalty that extends beyond the grave. What precisely are you planning? You can't cheat an honest man, Quinn said, a line from her old mentor echoing in her memory. But a man who thinks he's cheating you, he's the easiest mark in the world. She looked around the club, at the life she was leaving behind. They used my past to lock the cage. I'm going to use it to pick the lock. The penthouse study of Silas Blackwood was a cathedral of cold logic. Floor-to-ceiling screens displayed shifting global market data in a silent, hypnotic dance. In the center of the room, on a pedestal of black obsidian, sat a single terminal. It had no keyboard, no mouse, only a smooth, dark screen. This was the interface for Cerberus. Quinn, now dressed in a simple but elegant black dress provided by Evelyn, walked slowly into the room. Alistair, Silas's imposing driver and head of security, stood by the door. He had bypassed the new locks Keon had installed with a quiet efficiency that spoke of years of practice. They've tripled the encryption, Alistair said, his voice a low rumble. Even our best people can't get through it. It would take weeks. We don't have weeks, Quinn murmured, circling the terminal. Her eyes weren't on the screen. They were on the room. Silas was a man of symbols. The answer wouldn't be in the code, it would be in the design. Evelyn stood by the desk, a slim tablet in her hand. I've cross-referenced every legal document, every personal letter. There's no mention of a password or key. Quinn stopped in front of the obsidian pedestal. She ran her hand over its cold surface. Cerberus, she said aloud. The three-headed dog that guards the gates of the underworld. Why name it that? Silas had a classical education, Evelyn offered. He appreciated the mythology. No, Quinn said, shaking her head. A man like Silas doesn't just appreciate things. He uses them. Everything has a purpose. She looked at the blank screen. He told you, the key to the lock is the lock itself. He wasn't being poetic. She remembered the ace of spades, the two sides of the same card, an end and a beginning. She looked at her reflection in the dark screen. Then she looked at Evelyn's reflection and Alistair's. 3 people, 3 heads. Her eyes widened. It's not a password, it's a game, a card game. It has to be. She turned to Alistair. Did he have a favourite? Poker? Bridge? Alistair thought for a moment. He never played. He said playing was for fools who didn't understand the math. But he collected things, rare decks of cards. He had one he was particularly fond of, a 19th century Florentine deck. He kept it in the desk drawer. Quinn's heart hammered. She went to the desk, Evelyn following. She pulled open the top drawer. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a single, ornate wooden box. She opened it. The deck was beautiful, the cards thick and embossed with intricate designs, and one card was missing. The ace of spades, Quinn breathed. The one he gave to me. She reached into the pocket of her new dress. She hadn't been able to part with it. She pulled it out. The card felt electric in her hand. What are you thinking? Evelyn asked. I think Cerberus needs its 3 heads, Quinn said. She walked back to the terminal and gently placed the ace of spades on the pedestal in front of the screen. Nothing happened. Her shoulders slumped. For a moment, she had been so sure. She had been wrong. The clock was ticking. Wait, Alistair said, stepping forward. He pointed to the base of the pedestal. Etched into the obsidian, almost invisible, was a single, tiny inscription. Quinn bent down to read it. Tria prima. The 3 primes, Evelyn translated, an alchemical term, salt, sulfur, and mercury, the 3 core elements believed to make up all things. 3, Quinn repeated, the word echoing. 3 parts of a magic trick, 3 heads of Cerberus, 3 primes. She looked at the single card. It wasn't enough. The game needs 3 players. She looked at Evelyn, then at Alistair. He knew you would be here, she said, the realization dawning on her. He chose you as executor, Evelyn, and he trusted you with his life, Alistair. We are the 3 heads. She took a deep breath. Place your hands on the pedestal, on either side of the card. Evelyn and Alistair exchanged a skeptical glance, but did as she asked. Quinn placed her own hands down, her fingers brushing the edges of the card. The 3 of them stood in silence. And then the screen flickered to life. It displayed a single sentence in stark white text. The house is open. Place your bet. Below the text, 3 virtual cards appeared, face down. It's a game of 3-card Monte, Quinn whispered, a slow smile spreading across her face. The oldest con in the book, the ultimate test of perception. The goal is to find the money card, Evelyn said, but the game is rigged. The dealer uses sleight of hand to ensure the player always loses. Exactly, Quinn said. Silas isn't asking us to win. He's asking us how we would play. She looked at the screen. He's testing our character, Do we play the odds? Do we try to cheat? Or do we see the real trick? She remembered what she had told Silas. You're showing me two sides of the same card, an end and a beginning, and asking me which one I see, what I value. The video of her dealing cards flashed in her mind, the accusation, a common card cheat. Silas had seen that file. He knew her past. He wasn't testing her ability to spot a cheat. He was testing whether she had moved beyond it. We don't play, Quinn said with finality. She reached out, and, instead of touching one of the 3 cards on the screen, she touched the text above them. The house is open. Place your bet. The screen flashed. The 3 cards vanished, replaced by a new message. The house always wins. But a wise player knows when to fold. The screen dissolved into a file directory. At the top was a single encrypted folder labeled Codicil 6B, The Prestige. They had found the poison pill. The emergency board meeting was held in the main conference room on the 80th floor. It was a sterile, intimidating space designed to make visitors feel small. Kian and Serafina sat at the head of the table, flanked by a smug Fletcher Kane. They looked like royalty presiding over an execution. Quinn entered with Evelyn Reed at her side. She looked pale, tired, and defeated. It was a masterful performance. Let's get this over with, Kian said, dispensing with formalities. We are here to ratify the board's provisional vote to enact the morality clause, paragraph 6 of the Blackwood Trust. Mr. Kane, if you would. Kane stood, projecting the video of Quinn's bottom deal onto the massive screen behind him. As you can see, Miss Vance has a documented history of fraud and deception. Her character is, to put it mildly, compromised. She is a danger to the reputation and stability of this company. He then produced a stack of files. Furthermore, we have a sworn affidavit from a Mr. Jimmy Fingers Gallo, a known associate from her past, stating that she cheated him out of over $50,000 in a high-stakes game. That's a lie, Quinn said, her voice sounding weak, desperate. Jimmy was the houseman. I was just the dealer. I never played. A dealer who manipulated the deck for a cut of the profits, Serafina added, her voice dripping with venom. You are a parasite, Miss Vance. You preyed on our father in his moment of weakness, and now you expect to run his company. The board will not stand for it. One by one, the board members, who had been systematically bribed or threatened by Kian, voiced their agreement. The vote was a foregone conclusion. It is decided then, Kian announced, a triumphant smirk on his face. Quinn Vance is removed from any and all control of the Blackwood estate, effective immediately. The assets will remain frozen until my sister and I, as the only remaining family, can stabilize the company. He looked at Quinn. Security will see you out. I believe there's a bus station a few blocks from here. Quinn didn't move. She just looked at him, her expression slowly changing from fear to a calm, icy resolve. You're right about one thing, Kian, she said, her voice suddenly clear and strong, commanding the attention of the entire room. My father. And yes, I will call him that, because he showed me more fatherly wisdom in one evening than you've seen in a lifetime, was a man who valued character above all else. She nodded to Evelyn. Paragraph 6, the morality clause, does indeed state that the beneficiary must be of sound moral and strategic character, Evelyn said, standing. However, you seem to have overlooked the codicil to that clause, which Mr. Blackwood designated to be unsealed only in the event of a hostile challenge to his chosen heir, a challenge which you, Mr. Blackwood, just formally initiated and concluded. Evelyn placed a tablet on the table and swiped. The main screen behind Kian flickered, replacing the video of Quinn with a new file. It was an audio recording. Keon's voice filled the room, drunk and arrogant. "Let the old man have his fun, Sarah. The doctors gave him 6 months. All we need is for him to stay alive long enough to sign the papers. After that, we invoke the medical power of attorney and put him in a comfortable home." The board members stared, stunned. Keon's face went white. "That recording," Evelyn stated calmly, "was captured by your father's personal security system, which he had you both sign a consent form for years ago under the guise of family protection. He knew you were plotting against him." She swiped again. A new document appeared on the screen. Bank records from a casino in Macau, showing Kian had leveraged company assets to secure a $20 million line of credit to cover his gambling debts, a clear violation of his fiduciary duty as a board member. "As for strategic character," Quinn said, her eyes locking on Kian, "Silas defined it as the ability to assess risk, something you seem to have a problem with." She then turned her gaze to Serafina, who was shrinking in her chair. "And as for moral character, Serafina." Evelyn swiped a final time. The screen showed internal memos and encrypted emails. They detailed Serafina's plan to embezzle funds from the Blackwood Charitable Foundation, the very charity in her father's name, to finance her lavish lifestyle and bribe a senator for a vanity appointment to an arts committee. "My father's will was not a gift," Quinn said, her voice ringing with authority. "It was a trap. The morality clause wasn't meant for me. It was meant for you. He knew you couldn't resist using it, and in doing so, you would expose yourselves. You would be the ones to fail his final test." Fletcher Kane sputtered, This is inadmissible, a violation of privacy." "On the contrary," Evelyn said, holding up a signed document. "It is the legally binding codicil to the will you yourself invoked. It states, and I quote, 'Should my children, Kian and Serafina, be found by the board to be of unsound moral or strategic character, they are to be stripped of their board seats, their company shares, and their family name. They are to be disinherited, not just from my fortune, but from my legacy." Quinn stood up and walked to the head of the table. She looked down at the trembling, defeated siblings. "The Ace of Spades is the death card," she said softly, for only them to hear. "An ending. You saw it as my end. But Silas and I, we saw it as yours." She turned to the shell-shocked board. "I am the chairwoman of this company. My first act is to accept the resignation of Kian and Serafina Blackwood. My second is to inform Mr. Kane that our legal department will be filing charges for conspiracy, fraud, and attempted extortion against the rightful heir." "Alistair," she said into her phone. The doors to the boardroom opened, and Alistair entered with 2 uniformed police officers. "Kian Blackwood, Serafina Blackwood, Fletcher Kane, you are under investigation. Please come with us." As they were led away, stripped of their power and dignity, Quinn took her seat at the head of the table. She looked at the board members, who now stared at her with a mixture of fear and awe. "The assets are now unfrozen," she said to Evelyn. "Yes, effective immediately," Evelyn confirmed. "Good," Quinn said, her composure finally breaking, as a single tear of relief traced a path down her cheek. "Wire $50,000 to Children's Memorial Hospital. Tell them Leo Vance's surgery is a go." 1 year later, the view from the top of Blackwood Tower was different. To Quinn, it wasn't a circuit board of assets to be controlled, but a community of lives to be improved. The office was no longer sterile. A child's drawing of a superhero with a repaired heart was taped to one of the massive windows. "Quinn, Now, Chairwoman Vance moved with a quiet confidence that had replaced her old anxiety. She had just finished a conference call, green-lighting a project that would use the Cerberus system not to predict market crashes, but to predict and allocate resources for natural disaster relief. Her phone buzzed. It was a picture message from Leo. He was standing on a soccer field, his face flushed with victory, holding up a small trophy. He was healthy, vibrant, and alive. He was the reason for everything. She smiled, saving the picture. A news alert popped up on her screen. Blackwood siblings sentenced. Kian Blackwood receives 10 years for fraud. Serafina Blackwood receives 7 years for embezzlement. The article mentioned Kian's crippling gambling debts had left him with nothing, while Serafina's society friends had completely abandoned her. Silas's will had been absolute. They were left with only their reflections, and in the harsh light of a prison cell, they had finally seen what was there. Evelyn Reed walked in, holding a tablet. The Q3 projections are in. The Blackwood Foundation's new initiatives have increased our public approval rating by 40%. The board is ecstatic. Good, Quinn said. What about the Onyx key? The purchase went through this morning, Evelyn confirmed. You are now the owner of a very historic, very smoky jazz club. First order of business, Quinn said, a playful glint in her eye. Give Mr. Gable a generous severance package and a lifetime ban. Then double the staff's salary and implement a full benefits package. Tell them the house is under new management. Evelyn smiled. Consider it done, Madam Chairwoman. That evening, Quinn didn't take the Bentley home. She walked down to the street, to the entrance of the tower, and looked at the city lights. She thought of Silas, the strange, brilliant, lonely man who had seen a queen hiding in a waitress. He hadn't given her his fortune. He had given her a chance to earn it. He hadn't given her a winning hand. He had given her the cards and trusted her to know how to play the game.